citizens participate in policy legislation by initiative and plebiscite. Now, the BC government, as you know, legislated in 1996 the right of citizens to propose initiatives with Ujjal Dosanjh. However, they made the requirements so onerous, so difficult, that no initiative has ever been accepted, because they want 10% of each writing to sign. Now, I presume that Canada Elections has the technology and the resources to set up a website where people can register initiatives. They can also tabulate the popularity of each initiative as a non-binding plebiscite. Now, my question to you is, if elected again, would you advocate for the legislation of initiative and plebiscite?
No, I am not a supporter of direct democracy. I'm a supporter of parliamentary democracy. Our society is very complex, and what we do is we ask citizens to choose their representatives who will make decisions not on just one issue at a time, but on the whole range of issues that are in front of them. And I have to say, as a member of a minority, as a gay man, I've seen the experience in states which have initiative and referendum, where my community spends its whole time fundraising to protect the rights that they already have. Because the danger is that those who have money win initiatives and referendums, and those who do not lose them, and that those who are popular and mainstream in terms of the issues win those referendums, and those who might be minority groups quite often lose. So I am a supporter of parliamentary democracy and not direct democracy.
All right. You realize that there are human rights, the Charter of Human Rights, that would not put gay rights in a referendum, because
except that you can say that also in Oregon and California, but they still had to fight those. And then they had to be challenged in court afterwards under the constitutional arrangements. So it still put my community to the same task, both of raising funds to fight the referendum, and then after they're approved, raising funds to fight the court case. So no, I don't believe that that has any impact on what happens.
Okay. So no direct democracy for you?
No, I'm a parliamentary democracy person.
Representative, parliamentary, monarchic representation.
That's the system we have, and I think it can serve us very well.
Good. The question to you is, if elected, would you advocate for the legislation of such an initiative and plebiscite legislation?
No, I wouldn't advocate that. I would be very interested though to see civil society stepping up and doing this, and see if it can work and how it can work and what are the options to make it work. Especially your idea of online voting, I think is a very interesting idea and should be something Canada considers down the road. But let's have civil society step up, show us how it can work, show what can happen, and then learn the lessons from there. I think it's too early to do what you're suggesting. I think there are much more important and immediate possibilities for democratic reform that will change how Canada works in 2015. Justin Trudeau has said that this will be the last election we have under the current first-past-the-post system, and we should get rid of the old way of electing people and move to a more proportionate, more proportional representation in our democracy. That would have an immediate impact on how politicians work together, get away from this adversarial approach, allow more women and other minorities to get into Parliament. So I would focus on that first as my democratic reform priority, and I'd love to see civil society stepping up with your idea. I think there's a lot of potential to renovate and innovate in our democratic system. I'd be very interested to see how it works, if people participate, if there's a way of identifying who's voting online and controlling identification and voter identification online, because that will be the future one day, but I don't think we're there yet. I think it's going to take time to get there.
All right. If you're elected, will you advocate for the legislation of initiative and plebiscite?
Absolutely. We love to be working, again, like I mentioned, across party lines, working for the citizens of this country. We work together, so we want to know what people are saying and what's important to them. And having plebiscites like this really keeps our finger, on the pulse of what's important to the people of this country. We're trying to restore our democracy. We're trying to have the power coming back into people's hands. How else can we do that but to give them the initiative to bring forth things that are important to them? It makes absolute sense.
Mm-hmm. So you would support to develop the same legislation that exists in BC, but better, because you would have the Canada elections run it in a way that everybody can have access to it.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good use of Canada elections.
Well, we have the right to hold plebiscites in this country already. We've held them before. We held a plebiscite in BC in 1916 to give women the vote. I liked that one. 1952, we had a plebiscite to bring in daylight savings time. I liked that one. But back in 1898, all of the provinces except Quebec had a plebiscite to prohibit alcohol. I don't know if many people would like that as much today. You know, I like the concept of participatory democracy, but I think our problem is that plebiscites can be distorted. They can be distorted and be undemocratic by special interest groups, by big money, by misinformation campaigns, by vague wording, and by representing only the people who take part, not the people who don't. Our system right now of first past the post democracy is broken. And I think before we start talking plebiscites, we should be talking about, is it time for proportional representation in this country? Because if we have that, people will feel they have a voice. And I think that's where we start. I'm not opposed to plebiscites, but the other big change should be that it is local electoral associations should decide whether a federal candidate can run, not their federal leaders. Because again, that brings power back to the local riding as opposed to giving it to a national leader. And then you're going to start to see more responsiveness to the local voter as opposed to the national party.
Mm. So are you saying that you would support legislating plebiscites and initiative and plebiscite, like they passed legislation here in BC about initiative and recall?
Yes.
Would you support federal legislation on initiative and plebiscites?
I would, as long as the bar was kept high. I disagree with you that we need a lower bar. I think we need to keep the bar high for all of those reasons that I pointed out. They're so easy to manipulate and easy to be manipulated by special interest groups and big money. We've seen this in the United States. We need to be careful in Canada.
Joanne, how high should that bar be? Because here it's 10% of every write-in has to sign a paper saying this is a bona fide initiative.
I think that's a good bar.
And so 19 years, not one initiative has succeeded. So you think that's a good bar?
Well, we had one recall that did succeed.
No, recall is a different thing. I'm talking of initiative.
Yeah.
Okay? And initiative, they have not succeeded once. And you think that if we had initiative federally, should have the same threshold as the one here in BC?
I do.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
The question to you is, will you, if elected, advocate for legislation of initiative and plebiscite?
Absolutely. I think initiative and plebiscite is a great way to practice democracy. However, I think more pressing is the obvious defectiveness of our current democracy in terms of the first past the post system. More pressing, I think, would be to enact mixed member proportional representation, to scrap, for example, the Unfair Elections Act of Stephen Harper, to lower the voting age to 16, a whole host of other things we could do to make a more genuine democracy. The most important, however, I think, is dumping capitalism. I mean, I don't believe we can possibly have democracy coexist along such disproportionate wealth and powerful corporations and lobby groups that distort current legislation.
So would you advocate for somebody to initiate legislation that says let's dump capitalism and then see what the rest of the people say about it?
I think that couldn't hurt.
So you would advocate for initiative?
Yes, with the exception that we need to be careful that it's not taken advantage of, as we saw in California, in terms of affecting minority groups and other, important human rights, fundamental human rights.
Yeah, fundamental human rights have the Human Rights Charter. So if it's under the Human Rights Charter, then it would be excluded. But the people do make mistakes, and in California they did make a mistake.
That's
but
true.
10 years later, they reversed it, and they voted to support the school boards. So people have to make mistakes to learn if they created their own policy, and then they have the chance to reverse it. Whereas in our present system, when we give all our power to the politicians, they decide forever. We don't have the chance to change it. So you think that we should have that, even that though it is dangerous, because we might choose the wrong side. But should you think that we're mature enough to make our own decisions in policy making?
In general, we definitely support plebiscite and initiative, citizens' initiative, for sure. It's a practice of democracy.
Okay.